Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Tim Steed, Assistant General Manager at OCEA. And what I have for you today is a quick training about MOU ratification. This is Ratification 101. So in this very brief training, we're going to go through some of the steps that go into ratifying a tentative agreement after negotiations. So what are we going to cover today? Well, first, we're going to talk about how we got to ratification. Next, what steps go into ratifying an MOU, some of the common questions you might get, and some final thoughts. So let's get into it, shall we? Well, first, let's take a few steps back and talk about who negotiates the contract, right? The MOU. On one side of your screen, you can see the activist ladder, kind of a step-by-step guide about how people get involved in organizations. And on the other side, you can see OCEA's version of that. As you can see from the slide, the bargaining team are those union members who have moved up the activist ladder, have become involved in the union, and are now giving the amount of time to commit to those outcomes at the bargaining table. These are often also our OCEA board of directors. So these are the people who are the leaders of the union who, through time and involvement, have earned their way to the negotiations table and sit at the table to represent their fellow coworkers. Well, how do we negotiate the contract? Well, hopefully you've seen our Negotiations 101 video. If you haven't, take a few minutes to watch it. It's only 6 minutes long, but that details the whole process that has gone into negotiating the contract. And right now, we're going to talk about what happens when the process is done. You might recognize this slide from Negotiations 101. This is after the proposals have been exchanged, after a little give and take from each side, and now you have reached the tentative agreement. So let's talk about those next steps. First, the tentative agreement. Again, this has been something that's been negotiated by the negotiations team. It's after the process is complete, and this is something we live by. It's when we've gotten the most for as many as possible, and ultimately is the end. And I put an asterisk there because the end does have some steps. So let's talk about those steps. As you can see, we've already talked about reaching the agreement. Now we're going to talk about what comes next. The deal points get communicated out to the members. There are membership meetings that explain the tentative agreement, and then the membership votes on the tentative agreement. So let's go into these details one at a time. Once the negotiations team has reached their tentative agreement, the first step is we have to communicate that out to the union. That occurs usually through an email that details what has occurred in negotiations and that we have actually reached that tentative agreement. Accompanying that communication is also usually a one-page document that goes into some additional detail about what has been negotiated. This will cover the term, if there's any wages and other contract changes that union members need to be aware of. So that's the first step. We have to notify the membership that, yes, we have come to an agreement. So once we do that, we also then start a series of membership meetings. Our MOUs are often mature. They're complicated. It's not enough to have an email or a one-page document to know fully what's going on. So that's why our union will hold membership meetings. At those membership meetings, the negotiations team, the lead negotiator, those folks who have been at the table the entire time are present, and we talk about what went on and how we reached this final tentative agreement. It's a time to answer questions, dispel rumors, educate the unit membership, and also provide any additional documentation such as frequently asked questions. So once that communication goes out, it's important to get folks to those membership meetings so that they have an opportunity to learn more about the tentative agreement. So we've had the communication go out, we're holding our meetings, and then it's time for members to vote. A union is a democratic organization, so everything we do is through consensus and through voting. So when a tentative agreement is reached, it's not final until the members vote on it. So again, only members can vote on the tentative agreement. If you are not a member of the union, you are not entitled to vote on what's been negotiated. The voting is done by bargaining unit. Now, your bargaining unit that you're assigned to will be determined by your job classification. If you don't know what bargaining unit you're in, just go to the OCEA website. You can check out one of your MOUs or memorandums of understanding. And in the back, there's a whole listing of what classification is in each MOU. So once each bargaining unit has voted, it's a majority of votes cast. So it's important that everyone turns out to have their voice heard, and they can even vote yes or no on accepting the tentative agreement. Now, OCEA likes to make things convenient for our members, so sometimes we'll work with a company called Big Pulse, and Big Pulse specializes in online secure elections. So this way we have a neutral third party who administers the election, so that way we can be very confident in its security. Now, the OCEA Board of Directors, the elected leadership of your unit, are usually the only people who ever have any access to the final outcome at the end, and they certify exactly what the vote total is and whether or not the union members have voted to accept or reject their tentative agreement. So let's get into what the most frequently asked question is, which is, okay, what if the agreement is not ratified or we vote no? Well, this is a very simplified version of what would happen, but when that happens, you're at what's called impasse, meaning you're no longer exchanging proposals. You're no longer moving towards an agreement. This could then trigger mediation, where you bring in a third party to try to find some sort of solution, but keep in mind this isn't a binding process. During this time, the union may want to take direct action, meaning picketing or attending a meeting to talk to the elected officials in your jurisdiction. But ultimately, during this process, what could occur is that the employer could impose their last, best, and final offer. So that's why it's so important on these final thoughts that when a tentative agreement is reached, that's usually after so much work by your negotiations team, your workplace leaders who have been invested in that process. They feel they've gotten the most for as many, but it's not up to us. It's for every union member to express their voice and to vote. We're a democratic organization. It takes all of us fulfilling every single step of the activist ladder to secure a good MOU. So that's what the role of every union member is, and that's Ratification 101. I hope this has been helpful. We'll see you later, OCEA.